Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, her parents had another child, Emily's younger sister, Hannah. From early childhood, the girls were very close to each other. They lived in a loving and caring family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family moved to New Zealand. Auckland became their new home. When Emily fell in with the wrong crowd after emigrating to New Zealand, her middle-class parents sent her back to the UK to start a new life with her grandparents. In 2010, Emily flew to England to study at Brockenhurst College. She wanted to get a business degree and dreamed of becoming a model. In England, she lived at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth. Bournemouth, adjacent to Poole in the west, is a town in the county of Dorset, a popular resort on the English Channel coast. When Emily moved to England, her sister Hannah was still at school, and her parents, Mark and Caroline, divorced but maintained a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who attracted much attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner. He made quite an impression on her. Gradually, their communication grew into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily returned to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she had not seen for about 6 months. Her father met her at the airport. She ran up to him and hugged him tightly, saying she missed him very much. Emily had a very close relationship with her father, who loved her madly and missed her smile, laughter, and dirty jokes. The following day, the whole family went to Emily's favorite pizzeria. She told her parents that, apart from studying in college, she was engaged in modeling and made some incredible friends. She also mentioned the man she was dating, 20-year-old Elliot Turner. They had only been dating for a few months, and it seemed to her that she was too young for something serious. "I think I'm going to end it when I go back," she said. Emily spent the next few weeks hanging out with friends and family. She had a wonderful time. No one suspected they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight started boarding, it was hard for her to say goodbye to her family. However, Emily promised she would be back in 5 months. She wanted to see the matches of the Rugby World Cup, which was to begin on September 9th. While texting with her father a few days later, Emily informed him about breaking up with Elliot. But she did not go into details. Elliot behaved strangely after seeing the photos of Emily that she posted on social networks while in New Zealand. There were guys in these photos, and Elliot was very jealous. The son of a wealthy jeweler, Elliot Turner, was 20 years old, and his life seemed carefree. Turner was well known in the local bar and club scene in the Bournemouth and Poole areas, and was part of a gang of wealthy young men called the Firm. Called by his friends All Talk Turner because of his boasting, he met Emily in December 2010. The couple enjoyed the high life at the resort and often had fun until late at night. But Turner, who had a history of obsession with women, soon showed signs of jealousy. As a result, their relationship quickly escalated into violent arguments. Some people described him as a person displaying a threatening, aggressive, violent, controlling, and possessive nature. In January 2008, when he was 16, he received a harassment warning letter from the police telling him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he bombarded her with text messages and emails because she broke up with him. Turner loved being at the center of attention. He didn't need to work for a living. His parents gave him everything he needed. He skillfully manipulated people, including his parents. His life was all about parties, women, alcohol, and illegal substances. He considered himself a man who can do anything he wants. Elliot carried a hammer with him in case anyone tried to contradict him. His friends believed that Turner fancied himself a gangster and wanted to become the one everyone turned to for help. He could come to the bar and buy everyone a drink. Elliot bragged about driving a new Mini Cooper, but it was a gift from his grandmother. He tried to maintain his bad boy image with a series of supposedly streetwise messages on social networking sites, where he often referred to himself as Scarface or God. He didn't lack female attention, but when he met Emily, he became very attached to her. She complimented his image of a successful person, which he worked hard to create. As their relationship developed, Turner started showing his controlling behavior more and more often. He even threatened Emily that he would take her life. In an emotional plea to Turner, Emily wrote a note to him a few months before her death saying, 1. I love you. 2. Don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop talking about your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so constantly aggressive. Be more cool, because that is so much more hot and you make me scared because you're so intimidating. When Turner began to show his true face and when his controlling behavior started to go beyond all reasonable limits, Emily realized that he was not the person she wanted to be with. However, people like Turner don't understand rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was with friends in one of the entertainment venues. Surveillance cameras captured how she came to a nightclub with her friends. That evening, Turner read her Facebook messages and discovered that Emily was dating another man. Pissed him off. He came to the club and started arguing with Emily. This whole story ended with the girl throwing her drink in his face. Turner verbally abused her and threatened her with violence. He didn't like Emily's outfit. He thought it was too revealing. He dismissed the fact that Emily had broken up with him. The man wasn't going to let her go. Elliot ruined her evening, so she decided to leave. Yet her ex-boyfriend followed her. His friends heard him say, "I will kill her. I will go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. I would do 10 years. It wouldn't bother me." Turner caught up with Emily, somehow persuading her to go to his house. He said he wanted to talk in a more relaxed atmosphere. Elliot Turner lived with his parents. Perhaps that's why Emily went with him. Maybe she thought he would behave more calmly in the presence of his parents. Neighbors saw them go inside the house. The following morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called the emergency service, saying Emily was not waking up. It was about 9 a.m. Before the arrival of the ambulance, Anita listened to the operator's instructions on how to help Emily. Unfortunately, when the ambulance arrived, the only thing they could do was to state the death of Emily Longley. Anita was an Indonesian citizen who came to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When the couple had a son, they did not deny him anything, which was a big mistake. During her conversation with the emergency service operator, Anita's voice did not sound like the voice of a mother who had just found her son's girlfriend dead. She was too calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Thousands of miles from England, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 in the morning and saw a bunch of missed calls from his ex-wife, Caroline, and younger daughter, Hannah. There was also a voice message from Hannah, but Mark could barely make out what she was saying. Then he heard Caroline scream in the background and her words, "Emily is dead." Mark refused to believe it. He called his mother in England. When she answered, his whole world fell apart. His mother was crying hysterically. Moments later, one of the police officers took her phone. "I'm sorry to tell you that your daughter Emily is dead," he said. Mark couldn't believe it. After all, Emily was sitting on his couch and smiling just a week ago, flying to the UK. The grief-stricken father still refused to believe that his daughter was dead. But unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. The loss of the eldest daughter was a heartbreaking challenge for Emily's parents. The police told them that Emily had died in her sleep. It didn't make any sense. She was young and healthy. The police collected some evidence, but it was unclear what happened to Emily. They had to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators they had been home all night and had not heard anything suspicious. Elliot publicly mourned Emily by posting photos of them together on his Facebook page. The police had nothing bulletproof to refute the story of Turner and his parents that Emily mysteriously died in her sleep. During the investigation of any death, the main factor is to determine the cause of it. When investigators discover the cause of the victim's death, they understand what they are dealing with and how to conduct an investigation. While waiting for the autopsy results, the investigators found out that a few days before her death, Emily had posted something strange on her Facebook page. "I have a stalker," she added. "Someone just called me and I was like, 'Who's this?' And they were like, 'You don't know me, but I know everything about you.' And I was like, 'How did you get my number?' And he was like, 'I'll tell you when I see you,' and kept asking me out. So I hung up and they won't stop calling." Emily wrote on Thursday, May 5th. At the same time, the police managed to find out that before her death, Emily quarreled with Elliot Turner in front of other nightclub guests. After interviewing Turner's friends, investigators learned that he tried to control Emily's every move, that he found out about her meeting with another man, and most importantly, that Elliot threatened to take her life many times. But his friends did not attach any importance to this, believing that these were just words with which Turner strengthened his image of a gangster. The autopsy did not give an exact cause of Emily's death. However, experts mentioned it could be strangulation. And one of them said, the physical findings are entirely consistent with pressure being applied to the neck. Investigators believed that one of the Turner family members could be involved in Emily's death, so they decided to install listening devices in their house. The police were hoping to find out if they were hiding anything, and they were right to do that. They heard Elliot instructing his mother on how to behave with the police and what she needed to say. His father, Lee Turner, seemed to be the only person who understood what he was doing was wrong. But eventually, he submitted to the will of his son and wife. While listening to the recordings, investigators also heard what happened to Emily Longley. Elliot Turner admitted that he caused her death. They arrested Elliot Turner a week after Emily's death. He, of course, denied his guilt. His lawyers tried to challenge the authenticity of those audio recordings. However, having studied all aspects of this case, the judge allowed the prosecution to use the recordings as evidence. Not knowing the police were listening, Elliot admitted that he felt angry every day and that no one had ever pissed him off as much as Emily. During the trial in May 2012, his lawyer stated that their client acted in self-defense. Elliot Turner said that the quarrel in his bedroom turned violent and he had to grab Emily by the neck. He said he didn't strangle her. He just found her dead in his bed the next morning. During the second day of the trial, Turner told the court that he was disgusted by his actions that night. Allegedly, after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother saying how ashamed he was and that he was leaving for Spain. One can assume Elliot Turner was going to leave the country on the day of Emily's death, but changed his mind for some reason. When the police arrived at Turner's home after the 999 call, they saw packed bags. Elliot's passport was in his pocket. He admitted in court that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing false emails on her phone saying he had smashed her face into a table. When describing the fight they had before her death, he mentioned Emily started beating him with her hands and feet. He tried to calm her down before giving up and throwing her a 20-pound note for a cab. He said, "She just ignored me at first. Then 5 seconds later, she just went crazy. I had never seen Emily get to that point of rage. I didn't know what to do. She would not stop. I kept repeating myself, 'Stop it. Calm down.' At that point, I grabbed her by the neck using my right hand." Defense counsel Anthony Dunn asked, "Why did you do that?" Turner replied, "To stop her going nuts. I did not know what to do. My right hand made contact with her neck." When the defense counsel asked how hard he grabbed her, Turner replied, "I would not say very hard, but it was quite hard. I grabbed her and pushed her down onto the bed. I pressed down on her neck when she was in the lying down position." He said he held her there for 5 or 6 seconds, then let go and stormed out of the room. When asked if he intended to kill Emily, Turner replied, "No." He said he thought Emily had gone to sleep. Allegedly, he realized Emily was dead only when she did not wake up the following morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, spoke about how hard it was for him to lose his daughter. "Here is the thing about death, it sucks. It doesn't matter if it is your child, your partner, or your 99-year-old grandmother. It sucks that a person is there one day and not the next. Well, it is not something we can deal with easily. All anniversaries are hard. Birthdays are hard. Christmas is hard. Easter is also tough because it was the last time I really spent time with her," Mark Longley said. He said the heaviest part was that he would never see the woman she could have become. "I miss seeing the life she was denied unfold. We had a brief glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I was so proud of her. I am her father, and of course I'm biased, but the world really was a better place with her in it. It was certainly a lot more fun." At the trial, they portrayed Elliot Turner as a spoiled, wealthy kid whose parents wanted to help him escape punishment. The court heard he was given the run of the family's home in the affluent Queen's Park area of Bournemouth, where he would hold parties for his middle-class friends. Described as wild by his father, Lee, he was given his own living space in the converted garage of his parents' house, so he could come and go without disturbing them. It was in his room, which had its own mini bar, that he strangled Emily on his bed. The police examined the computers seized from Turner and found the following search queries: death by strangulation and how to avoid punishment for a crime. The main motive of the crime was jealousy. The court heard testimony from Luke Ashford, who spent the night with Emily. As already mentioned, Elliot Turner found out about it. Even while in custody, Turner boasted that the jury would believe his twisted story that Emily had attacked him, and he had acted in self-defense when he strangled her in a fit of jealousy. In letters from his prison cell to his friends, he said he would soon drive the new Range Rover and move to Spain. He planned to sell the rights to his story and live a fashionable life. However, the jury quickly shattered his illusions when they found him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. Announcing the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dobbs described Turner as a man of striking arrogance. She said, "Emily was a lovely, kind, fun-loving girl who brought a ray of sunshine to those she touched. That light has been extinguished suddenly and needlessly by you. You did not love her. She was just a trophy. The relationship, if it can be called that, was all about you. It was about control you carried out using aggression and threats. You can put away thoughts of champagne, Bentleys, and girls and concentrate on the reason you are serving a life sentence." Mrs. Justice Dobbs also sentenced Turner to 9 months to run concurrently for perverting the course of justice. But Elliot Turner wasn't the only person on trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, whom Turner used for cash to fund his lavish partying, loved their son so much they tried to cover his crime. Lee destroyed Turner's confession letter, and Anita took the jacket from the bedroom where the letter allegedly was. His mother even postponed calling an ambulance so her son could cover his tracks and let the family come up with a convincing story for the police. When asked why she did not call an ambulance, Anita Turner replied that she did not believe Emily was dead. Under cross-examination, they asked her if she thought Emily had ruined her son's life. After a pause of 6 seconds, she replied, "No." In the recording, Lee asked Anita whether they had done the right thing. "We've done the right thing," Anita replied. Both 51-year-old Anita Turner and 54-year-old Lee Turner were found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 27 months in prison. Mrs. Justice Linda Dobbs said, "The two of you chose to fight the case showing little remorse. Mr. Turner, you claimed you didn't know the contents of the letter when you destroyed it. But the fact it was burning on your conscience is quite evident from your anguished tone of voice on the tape." Released in 2013 after serving half of their sentence, they still live in the house where Emily Longley died. Emily's dad, Mark, broke down as he spoke about the verdicts after the case. Supported by former wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he said, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked us and disgusted us. That a man so evil like Turner could treat a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently is beyond belief. We are so proud of the fact that she had come halfway around the world to cause a better life for herself. This is a life Turner decided to end." Mark said there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting and that no one had taken his threats seriously until it was too late. He added, even his mother did not take him seriously when he texted her to tell her he was going to break Emily's neck. Perhaps if someone had taken his threats seriously, Emily might be with us today. I hope Turner suffers every day in prison for what he has done. In October 2020, the press reported that Elliot Turner's cellmates had beaten him in prison. It happened after he hung up photos of Emily in his cell and boasted of receiving letters from female fans. Some of his cellmates attacked him after he said he would soon return to his life full of champagne, Bentleys, and birds. In 5 years, Turner will have the right to apply for early release from prison. One can only hope that common sense will prevail and that the parole board will make the right decision regarding a person who still has no remorse for his actions. Little is known about the early life of John Parker. It is scarcely mentioned that he was born in 1970, had at least one sibling, and lived in Indiana, United States. He came from a middle-class family and was always an entrepreneurial young man with a desire for independence, self-improvement, and a hunger to take on the world. Therefore, it is not surprising that immediately after graduating from high school, he sought ways to earn money and, according to his brother, His first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, though he did not last long there. For reasons unknown, John became angry at work and quit. However, this did not deter his ambitions, and sooner rather than later, he found a new job that not only allowed him more independence in his tasks, but also led him to discover his true calling, sales. John began working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family mocked him, but in a short time, John proved to everyone that he had found his direction in life. In fact, by the end of his first year, he was practically the company's #1 salesman in the area and announced he would not settle for just that. Working long hours from 12 to 16 hours a day, he became not only a sales leader whose achievements were recognized at company meetings, but also a guide for other salespeople who found new ideas, inspiration, and a role model in him. It was during this time that he met 20-year-old Judy, a young woman who was born in October 1969 and lived in Texas in a low-income family of 3 children. She was very outgoing, and even though John was not looking to hire more salespeople at the time, Judy convinced him that she was the best in the sales field. Despite her young age, she was not a shy girl. In fact, she was a fully grown woman who, with her parents' consent, had married at 14 and was divorced with 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, by the time she met John. John decided to give this determined applicant a chance and became her mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy not only earned a place in the sales force led by John, but also won the heart of her boss. And sometime later, they embarked on a romantic relationship. John's life could not have been better. He had a well-earned reputation as an excellent salesman and trainer, and also had Judy's support in life and work. With these foundations, he decided to start his own business in Michigan, becoming a sales and service operator for Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, passing on his personal secret and the enthusiasm that had made him a star in the sector. His company was recognized as one of the top in the area, and John always highlighted that he had achieved this success thanks to Judy's support. In 1992, with his professional life resolved, the couple got married. And in the following years, they dedicated themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson could achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, bringing the number of children in the family to 4. They moved residences several times, always to better locations, and the children began to enjoy the benefits earned through the hard work of John and Judy. Initially, he had no issues with his wife's children. Christina was a sweet little girl, and Daniel was somewhat hyperactive and mischievous. The Parkers enjoyed a good home, excellent schools for the children, high-end cars, and frequent vacations. John was amassing a significant fortune and did not want to hide it. On the contrary, he used it as an incentive for the young salespeople he trained, showing them what could be achieved through hard work. However, as time passed and Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems began. Christina's choice of friends was terrible, as she chose those with the worst behavior and engaged in drinking with them. Allegedly, according to some sources, she also used drugs. Meanwhile, 13-year-old Daniel was not on a good path either and seemed to be angry and poorly accompanied all the time. On one occasion, while with a group of friends, Daniel took John's car and drove around the neighborhood, destroying many of the mailbox posts. The next day, John went from house to house paying the owners for the damage caused to prevent them from reporting the boy to the police. Around this time, John was also called to his stepson's school to receive a complaint about the boy's bad behavior. It appears that on this occasion, John ended up hitting the young man, which of course generated tension in the relationship. After 9 years together, Judy finally took her family to Texas so they could see the humble place where she had grown up and meet one of her brothers who still lived there. During this trip, Judy complained to her brother that her marriage was failing and that John mistreated her children. The truth was that Judy, far from recognizing that her older children were on the wrong path, sided with them, which of course heated up what seemed to be a pressure cooker. If everything was already bad, things worsened when John began to suspect that his wife was being unfaithful with an employee of his company. True to his way of solving problems, John was not a man to sit and stew over a problem, but a man of action. To leave no room for doubt, He installed cameras in various parts of the office and finally obtained irrefutable proof that confirmed his suspicions. At that moment, John's world collapsed, and his previously cheerful and cordial behavior took a 180-degree turn. He began to drink, and under the influence of alcohol, he not only had terrible arguments with Judy, but also became rough towards his children. His daughter Tiffany received a beating with a belt when her teacher informed her father that she had not brought her homework to school. When the teacher saw the marks from the beating the next day, she called social services to report the incident. Before they arrived, John made it clear to the four kids that if they wanted to continue enjoying the luxurious life they had been living up to that moment, it was better to say nothing about the beating. Indeed, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel for what had happened, and he did not deny it. However, John's bad mood did not only affect his family. His employees and even the company's clients suffered from the betrayed husband's outbursts of rage. Seeking to put distance between his wife and her lover, he decided to move the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still being in love with Judy and hoping that by removing her from temptation, they could have a fresh start, things did not improve. While Judy began to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, John let his beard grow, started smoking, his wardrobe was reduced to jeans, and he was constantly distracted. The business suffered as a result of his state, ending up almost bankrupt and having to sell his boat to stay afloat. Rumors circulated in the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man. Though it was unclear if the rumors were true, they undoubtedly fueled more disagreements. At a certain point, Judy informed him that she had decided to divorce, but it would not be that simple. John felt that he had given everything to his wife, pulled her out of poverty, accepted her children, showered her with luxuries, and above all, loved her to the point of idolatry. With that same passion turned into resentment, he began to cut off all his wife's sources of money. He made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and his secret weapon was the recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the scenario at the beginning of 2003, and of course, the tensions between the couple affected the children, whose behavior went from bad to worse. Even Tiffany spent the holidays grounded because she and a friend had started a fire on school grounds. The end of the arguments came on Thursday, April 17, 2003, when John and Judy went out to dinner alone at a restaurant, possibly trying to find a solution to their situation, or maybe just trying to tone down the confrontation. After dinner, they called home to check on the kids and announced they would return shortly. At that moment, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they headed to the company, and John took the opportunity to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late. The couple arrived at the office in a deserted industrial area just before 10 p.m. Both entered the office while John talked to Jeff. Judy picked up her daughter's notebook and returned to the car parked outside. Minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side to search for something in the vehicle, when suddenly two loud bangs were heard and John collapsed on the parking lot floor. Instantly, the 911 received calls from Judy and the other from Jeff. As routine in such cases, police and medical assistance units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was declared dead on the scene. Upon interrogating Judy, who was inside the car at the time of the incident, the woman could practically contribute nothing. She stated she was sitting there when her husband came out of the office, opened the back door on the driver's side, and immediately heard two detonations. Judy recounted that her reaction to hearing the shots was to hide, protecting herself with the seat. And when she lifted her head, she only managed to glimpse what seemed to be a man in dark clothing running away from the car. John's wallet was missing, so at first glance, the incident seemed to have been a robbery. But the more the scene was analyzed, the more doubts arose in the investigators' minds. No one besides the couple knew they were going to be there, so a series of questions were formulated. Why would someone be looking to commit a random robbery in an industrial area that had no people in circulation at night? If it had been a robbery, why did they first take his life and only then stripped him of his wallet when in plain sight, John was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry? Why had the thief not searched the pockets as criminals usually do in these kinds of assaults? More questions than answers. 2 bullet casings were found at the scene of the attack. This matched Judy's account of hearing 2 detonations. One of the shots ended John's life almost immediately, and as for the other, there was no official information. With their heads full of questions, the investigators began their work. And of course, the first person they took a statement from was Judy. She claimed that sometime before, her husband had had a heated argument with an employee of his company and identified the man. Beyond this, Judy could not provide anything more of interest beyond what she had said at the scene of the incident. Jeff was also not helpful. He was inside the office, and when he came out upon hearing the detonations, everything was already over. Meanwhile, the authorities contacted the Parker residence, and the call was answered by Christina, who was informed that her stepfather had passed away. With the robbery motive almost ruled out, detectives turned their focus towards John's circle, starting with the allegedly resentful employee. The man confirmed they had a significant argument, but said it had been amicably resolved. Moreover, he had an alibi that was investigated and verified. The investigation then expanded to nearly everyone close to the young businessman, business partners, past and current employees, competitors, and even John's friends and family. The only slightly suspicious finding was the interaction between the widow and the company's general manager, but there was no substantial evidence. Judy's demeanor during her husband's funeral was very intriguing. Comments mentioned Judy appearing cheerful and socializing with friends in stark contrast to the expected mourning behavior. Her ex-husband, the father of her 2 children, was also noted to be comfortably reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after John's murder, Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of involvement. This suspicion was based on an incident 6 months prior, where police were alerted by gang members that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. Although they said they never intended to follow through and had merely kept the money, the police deemed the story implausible, confiscating the money and filing a report without apparent further action. However, given John's eventual murder, investigators revisited Daniel's potential involvement. Under interrogation, Daniel confessed to paying individuals to harm John, intending not to kill, but to injure him, like breaking his legs. Despite detaining one of the youths Daniel allegedly negotiated with, he was released due to a solid alibi verified by the investigation. Daniel was released after 9 days due to lack of substantial evidence and his minor status. Later, it was revealed that John had issues with Judy's children, leading to more investigation into Daniel and bringing to light suspicions about Judy's daughter, Christina, 17. Christina denied everything when questioned, and like before, the alleged plan led nowhere. Given that both teenagers had shown a desire to eliminate John, investigators wondered where the money for these schemes was coming from, suspecting Judy as the only possible source. Further inquiries revealed that the relationship between the couple had significantly deteriorated prior to John's death, with at least one of Judy's affairs coming to light. However, sources indicated that John had no intention of leaving his wife and was seeking ways to salvage the relationship. The primary motive for Judy to target her husband appeared to be financial, with detectives discovering John had 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. Judy had attempted to claim this money after her husband's death, but the insurance company initially refused to pay, citing the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was further complicated by John's father, who suspected Judy's involvement in his son's demise. Despite these leads, the case eventually stalled, with only circumstantial evidence available. Life moved on, but significant changes occurred within the Parker family household. Judy was hardly ever home, apparently busy with her new partner, Jeff, John's trusted manager. In her absence, the older siblings took care of their younger half-sisters, Tiffany and Erica. Months later, Judy and Jeff decided to move out of state with John's younger daughters, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and with a boyfriend. Though the investigation had hit a dead end, authorities kept the case open, regularly revisiting the files in hopes of finding something substantial. Their persistence paid off when, following a new lead, they interrogated some schoolmates of Christina and Daniel, who admitted to selling them a firearm. This information led detectives to investigate a piece of family-owned land used by Christina for shooting practice. Upon inspecting the area, investigators indeed found several bullet casings. These findings were analyzed in laboratories and a significant clue was discovered. The bullet casings matched those from John's crime scene. In 2007, additional information emerged through a colleague, a narcotics officer who had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, involved in a drug case and arrested. Seeking leniency in his case, the ex-boyfriend disclosed a conversation with Judy in which she mentioned that it was her son Daniel who had fired the shot that ended John's life. Confronted with this information, 21-year-old Christina, linked to the weapon used in the crime, quickly began to talk. She admitted to purchasing the weapon and calling her parents on the night of the incident, asking them to stop by the office under the pretense of picking up forgotten homework. She confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When 19-year-old Daniel was located and detained in Arizona, he was presented with the new ballistics evidence and his sister's account. He readily admitted to being the one who shot John, but claimed that Judy, their mother, was the mastermind behind the plot. Daniel disclosed that Judy had forged company checks to gather the necessary funds to hire hitmen to kill John. The amount stolen was reportedly $7,500. However, when the initial plan fell through because the hired individuals took the money without completing the job, Judy allegedly instructed them to purchase the weapon for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed it was Judy's idea to create the pretext for leaving the house that night by making the call about the homework. He stated he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accidental discharge while he was rifling through John's pocket for his wallet, following his mother's instructions. He was also told to return home without alerting his younger sisters, a task facilitated by Christina, who kept the girls occupied with television. The siblings claimed their mother had convinced them to commit the crime by alleging they were victims of abuse by John and promising them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also revealed that this was not Judy's first attempt to kill her husband. She had previously tried to poison his food, leading only to a brief hospitalization for John under the guise of food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to the conspiracy charge and was released on bail several months later in March 2008. Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge to kill his stepfather and made a deal to admit his guilt and implicate his mother in the crime. In exchange for his cooperation, the prosecution agreed not to charge him with the more serious offense of murder, although he would still face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison. Daniel claimed that nearly a year before the incident, when he was 14, his mother and sister first asked him to help kill John. He detailed that his mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, as well as providing him with black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do to carry out the grim task, including taking a thorough shower upon returning home to eliminate any traces of gunpowder. Ultimately, Judy took responsibility for disposing of the weapon, the clothes worn during the crime, and her husband's wallet. Facing the inevitable in July 2009, 6 years after her husband's death, Judy surrendered to the authorities and agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, acknowledging her role in planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution requested that she be sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 28 years and a maximum of 35 years. Judy, nearing 40, was sentenced to 33 years in prison in late August 2009. The following month, Daniel was sentenced to 23 years. And in early October, Christina, who eventually pleaded guilty to aiding a criminal, received a 5-year sentence. Press reports indicate that Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and chose to live a low-profile life thereafter. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but tragically, she died from a drug overdose shortly after her release. This case is marked by greed. Despite Judy's difficult early life and later success, her insatiable desire for more led her to commit heinous crimes. Sadly, her actions not only destroyed a successful entrepreneur, but also profoundly impacted her 4 children, leading 2 to prison and leaving the younger ones without their father and mother. The case of Jordan Worth, a sadist with an angelic face. Statistics on victims of domestic violence are not just difficult to keep, but virtually impossible because many people simply do not seek help, not wanting to make a fool of themselves, so to speak. Sometimes people endure years of abuse, beatings, and humiliation, and some facts are revealed only when the irreparable happens. Simply put, these statistics are often based on dead bodies. The case of a young English woman named Jordan Worth made headlines across the country in 2018 and was in many ways, if not unique, then at least special. First, this fragile person with an angelic appearance destroyed the stereotype that cruel tyrants and abusers in relationships are men because they are trivially stronger physically. And secondly, she became the first woman in British history to receive a real prison sentence for domestic violence and coercive control because previously on such charges, only men were imprisoned. Fortunately, tragedy was avoided in this story, but the very fact that a young woman and mother of 2 children almost tortured to death, the father of her heirs, causes at the very least bewilderment. And now let's understand how in principle such a situation could develop and why Worth's chosen one. Alex Skeel tolerated inhuman treatment for so long and did not go to the police, even when his life was in real danger. Before he met Jordan Worth, Alexander was born in 1995, August 17th, in a town called Kingston upon Hull in a fairly well-to-do, friendly, and loving family. He and his twin brother were welcome and long-awaited children, but they were born much earlier than expected, because of which doctors seriously feared for them and did not make any prognosis. Spent the first months of their lives in the hospital in special chambers for premature babies with critically low body weight. But thanks to the efforts of experienced doctors, the children soon recovered. True, Alexander's brother gained weight faster, and by the first birthday, he had practically no traces and consequences of prematurity. Alex himself turned out to be weaker. Moreover, he suffered from excessive accumulation of fluid in the brain, hydrocephalus, because of which he received a disability. Nevertheless, Alexander's health problems from birth did not affect his intellectual development, and physically, he was not much different from his peers, and even actively engaged in sports at school. Spouses Skeel adored their sons, from infancy surrounded them with love and care, as well as spared no effort and money to give them a good education and provide a better life. After graduating from high school, both brothers entered the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alexander was smart enough, had an attractive appearance, tried to regularly attend the gym, and in general enjoyed success with the opposite sex, except that unlike his brother, who willingly went on dates and had affairs, he was quite shy and more focused on his studies. A love at first sight. It was in college that Alex met a young beauty named Jordan Worth. The girl was his age. She grew up in a wealthy family, and from a young age she knew almost nothing to refuse. She dressed beautifully and expensively, carefully watched her appearance, and led an active social life. Jordan was considered one of the most popular girls in college, which tried to court many guys. In addition, she, in parallel with her studies, worked as a volunteer, raising funds and organizing assistance to local shelters for homeless animals, as well as starving children in Africa. Worth was even repeatedly recognized for her efforts and for trying to make the world a better place. At first glance, this girl seemed a real angel in the flesh, kind, sympathetic, in addition, intelligent and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her at first sight, but at first thought that bright and popular Jordan will not even pay attention to him. However, as it turned out, he also immediately appealed to her, and she herself became the initiator of their acquaintance. Worth was much more experienced in amorous affairs, but for modest skill, she was the very first love of his life. Young people in love spent a lot of time together and were practically inseparable. In college, they were called the most beautiful couple, which was very flattering to Jordan. The first 6 months of the relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. Students tried to make each other pleasant surprises, gave cute gifts on small, but already so important for them dates. In their accounts in social networks, daily appeared joint photos on which they were happy together. The pictures were accompanied by touching captions and declarations of love. From the outside, it seemed that these two were simply made for each other, and a long and happy life was ahead of them. Quite quickly, the young people decided to live together and rented an apartment. Since they were both still students, significant financial assistance was provided by their parents, who, by the way, were not against the relationship of the couple. Jordan even liked Alexander's parents because she seemed to be a serious girl, planned to become a teacher of art history, and in general made a positive impression on others. However, time passed and Worth's behavior began to change. It all started with increased control, which increased with each month of their life together. Woman demanded from her young man to report to her every step, unapologetically checked his personal correspondence in the phone, email, as well as social networks, arranged wild scenes of jealousy literally in the same place and without any reason. Alexander tried not to pay attention to this because he was in love and such behavior of his passions did not bother him too much. Even when the beloved began to choose his own clothes, forcing him to wear only what she buys, the guy wrote it off as care on her part. Soon, the woman began to limit the circle of socialization of her boyfriend. Jordan herself chose with whom and when he can see and with whom he can no longer keep in touch. Under this separation fell not only friends and fellow students of Skill, but also members of his family. As Worth got away with it, her boyfriend never complained to anyone, and they continued to look like a happy, perfect couple in public and on social media. The young lady began literally to revel in her impunity. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone, without his knowledge blocked his family and friends, and even responded to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting form. And after Jordan erased the correspondence so that the guy did not even know what he said to people, from which they no longer wanted to communicate with him. The last straw and the breakup. The first alarm was raised by Alexander's twin brother when Jordan began to prevent their communication. By that time, the parents of the brothers also noticed that Alex distanced himself from the family and his beloved and at all began to avoid them, refusing to come to visit even on holidays and not wanting to communicate even on the phone. And on all attempts to get in touch with her, the woman was frankly rude. In those rare moments when the mother was able to get through to her son, she asked him to leave his chosen one, warning that nothing good will come out of this affair. But the young man in love did not want to listen to anyone and defended his girlfriend, claiming that she just so takes care of him and does not wish anyone anything bad. Soon the Skill family became aware that Worth forced their son to drop out of college, leave sports, and get a job. At the same time, the woman took away from her lover all the money he earned and spent it on his own needs and entertainment. Then the parents again made an attempt to talk to their son and convince him to leave Jordan, but their efforts were again unsuccessful. In 2013, during the celebration of his adulthood, committed a disgusting act, which she got away with. On that day, she and her friends celebrated the solemn event in a country hotel. And at some point, closer to the night, when the guests have already begun to disperse, the woman, without saying anything to anyone, simply disappeared. Alexander literally went crazy trying to find his beloved and worried that something might have happened to her. She returned to their room in the morning, being in a state of strong alcoholic intoxication. And when the guy tried to find out where she was, she just attacked him with fists and insults and then laughed and said that she was going to report to him. 2 months later, while celebrating Alexander's own 18th birthday, Jordan got into a fight in front of her boyfriend's family and friends. She beat up a 15-year-old girl neighbor, whom the Skill family knew well and had invited to the family party. Worth thought the woman was talking too sweetly to Alex, so she attacked her, pulling her hair and scratching her face. Jordan was barely calmed down, but it was clear to everyone what she was really like. After that, parents and brother insisted that Alexander broke up with the girl, who behaved so aggressively and inadequately. Surprisingly, but the guy listened to them for the first time and agreed that his chosen one overreacted. The same evening he talked to her and said that he would not return to their apartment, but would stay to live in his parents' house. The reunion and the birth of their shared children. It's been almost 6 months since the couple broke up. Alex returned to his studies but continued to work. He almost no longer thought about Jordan. When on the eve of New Year's Eve, 2014, she unexpectedly called and informed him that she was pregnant and in the spring they would become parents. was surprised and delighted with such news, and the woman apologized to him and said that she had not informed him earlier because she was sure that he did not want to see her anymore. The parents of the guy, having learned that they will soon have a grandchild, also melted and themselves offered the woman to move into their house. Worth agreed and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially married the father of her child, and 3 months later, she and Alexander had a common son, William. The young parents and grandparents were unspeakably happy, and until about mid-fall 2014, they lived amicably and quietly. It was a short period when Jordan really cared about her chosen one, tried in every possible way to please him, and fell in love with the guy anew. When William was 6 months old, it turned out that the girl was pregnant again. At this time, she again became capricious and hysterical and demanded from Alexander that they immediately move out of his parents' house. Such behavior on raging hormones, but agreed to rent them housing in the city, where they soon moved. In the summer of 2015, the couple had a second common child, a girl to whom they gave the name Alice. Alexander was absolutely happy and literally carried his wife and children in his arms. But Jordan, finally convinced that the chosen one will not go anywhere from her now, showed the darkest corners of her soul. The turning point. Worth again forbade her husband to communicate with his family and did not let his parents see their grandchildren. At the same time, the woman willingly accepted from them financial assistance and sometimes even made Alex himself to ask his parents for money. In just a few months, she completely subjugated his will, breaking him psychologically, and took his life under her total control. Jordan regularly humiliated and insulted her husband, and at one point, she started hitting him. At first, not violently, as if testing how he would react, how he would behave. And when the woman realized that her husband would tolerate everything, would not tell anyone, and nothing would happen to her for this, she gave free rein to her cruelty, displaying sophisticated, sadistic tendencies towards him. It all started when they started renovating their house, and the woman was constantly dissatisfied with everything Alexander did. He carelessly noted that it was simply impossible to please her, after which a hammer flew into his head, leaving a deep wound. The bewildered guy fell down and almost lost consciousness. Clasping the wound with his hand, he felt blood running down his face. Then he asked his wife to help him or call an ambulance, to which she indifferently replied, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and then just went into another room to watch TV. Alex treated the head himself, didn't go to a doctor, and didn't say anything to anyone. From that moment on, Jordan was convinced that whatever she did, she could get away with it, and her husband would never complain to anyone and certainly would not go to the hospital or the police. The next 3 years of his life turned out to be incessant moral and physical torture for Alexander. But he himself was already so depressed that he did not feel it and did not even feel the threat hanging over him. He continued to work, tried to provide his family with everything they needed, but he became increasingly irritated and discontented with his wife, who now not only beat him every day, but also invented more and more sophisticated abuse. Now the young man was forbidden to sleep on the matrimonial bed, and instead he was confined to the floor on the bedside mat without a blanket or pillow like a dog. He was also forbidden to enter the kitchen, and he could only eat what his wife and children did not finish. In fact, Alexander was starving because he could not buy anything outside the house because Jordan took away all his money. In addition, the woman deprived her husband of sleep and rest, having invented a new entertainment for herself. As soon as he fell asleep, she would beat him on the head, cut him, or pour boiling water on him. Skeel later recalled waking up each time in savage pain, bloody, or burned. After that, he would go to treat and bandage his wounds with improvised means, and his wife would go to bed quietly. Alexander perceived what was happening as something ordinary. He was finally broken morally and did not try to resist. The man completely stopped communicating with his parents and brother, and his wife on his behalf regularly asked them for money. Also financially helped them her parents so that the young woman could not deny herself anything. Skeel lost a lot of weight and weighed already less than 50 pounds. In addition, his body was constantly covered with wounds, abrasions, burns, and hematomas, which could not but cause questions from others. At work, the guy was urged to go to the hospital, so his wife forced him to quit for fear of exposure. After the dismissal, he finally became a hostage of Jordan, who now abused him day and night. Long-awaited deliverance. Despite the horror that was going on in the couple's home, those around them still thought they were a happy family. Maintained social media pages on behalf of her husband, where she regularly posted old photos of them and their children, accompanied by captions about how in love they were and how lucky they were to have met each other. No one could even think that a woman with angelic looks and mother of 2 children behind closed doors turns into a real sophisticated monster. She knocked out her husband's teeth, made a long and deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body did not come off the burns, but at the same time, he could not go to the hospital. And at home, from improvised, means he had only food film and tape which he used to pull the wounds. Neighbors periodically heard screams coming from the house of the couple, and sometimes they were so disturbing that concerned people called the police. But Jordan each time managed to send away the law enforcers, convincing them that she and her husband were fine. However, during the next visit of the squad called by neighbors, one of the police officers noticed a man clutching a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. In addition, he looked emaciated and had bruises of varying degrees on his face. The girl tried to convince the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes self-mutilated. But this time, the police called the paramedics and Alex was sent to the hospital. The doctors were literally shocked at the condition in which the young man was admitted. There was virtually no life on him, and his arm was so badly damaged that he was in danger of amputation. Alexander's body was covered with 2nd and 3rd degree burns. He weighed only 94 pounds. The ligaments of his shoulder were damaged from blows inflicted with a screwdriver, and there was a deep cut on his forearm, not counting the knocked out teeth and numerous hematomas. At that time, Jordan burst into the hospital, demanding that her husband be handed over to her and assuring her that nothing terrible had happened to him and that he had done all the damage to himself. However, no one believed the distraught woman, and it was decided to take her to the station for questioning. Fair punishment. At first, Worth denied everything and stuck to the original version that her husband was self-harming. But when Alexander's parents arrived at the station, having visited their son in the hospital, the woman changed her face and began to describe in detail all the things she had done to her husband. She said she had trained him like a dog and he wouldn't get away from her. At the same time, Jordan insisted that her husband provoked her to be violent because he was allegedly cheating on her and pissing her off on purpose. She also continued to claim that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-injure. Naturally, all these testimonies categorically refuted the parents of the guy, but he himself did not immediately decide to testify against his wife. Only after undergoing a course of treatment and working with a psychologist, Alexander finally dared to talk about all the horrors that he had experienced in his own home in recent years. However, was sure that she would face at most an administrative penalty, so she was not too worried about the upcoming trial. After hearing all the testimony, the judge found 22-year-old Worth guilty of willful infliction of grievous bodily harm, moral and physical abuse, and coercive control. She was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Even having 2 young children was not a mitigating factor for the sadist. Jordan was shocked by this sentence, and the case itself was unprecedented for the UK. The children were left in the care of their father and grandparents while their mother served her sentence. Alexander, having fully recovered from years of torture, became involved in community work, and is now actively helping victims of domestic violence himself. On July 4, 2023, Jordan, having served 5 years of her 7 and 1 year sentence, was released on parole. However, the woman is forbidden to approach her former spouse and see their joint children. She is reportedly engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Steeth and is preparing to become a mother for the 3rd time. It was in May 2002 in Australia, specifically in New South Wales, that Jamie and his wife Peta welcomed their firstborn. The arrival of their daughter was a source of immense joy, not only for her parents, but also for her maternal grandmother, who was immediately captivated by the little girl's beautiful blue eyes. Her warm smile radiated happiness, enchanting everyone around her. The kids had a privileged childhood setting along those idyllic coasts with their mild temperatures, where the locals knew each other well. Indeed, Jamie and Peta had earned the esteem of their community, and by extension, Lily also became very beloved. Later, the family welcomed their second and final child, whom they named Max. Jamie worked as the water polo coach at a girls' school in the economic and business heart of Sydney. It was there that Lily pursued her studies. Throughout her time at school, she proved to be an outgoing girl with lots of friends. Lily was an exceptional student who enjoyed helping her peers with less academic dedication. This virtue, coupled with her good nature, won her the affection of many. As her younger brother grew up, the young girl also dedicated herself with patience and care to helping him overcome difficulties. Always brimming with energy, she was keen to learn swimming and later, following in her father's footsteps, took up water polo, becoming an accomplished player. By the time she reached high school, she was recognized by all as one of the school's top students. Between her academic commitments and her numerous extracurricular activities, her teachers always saw her versatility and high level of achievement. These values were evident when the young girl not only joined the school's theater group, but also enrolled in dance classes. In reality, her dream was to excel in both disciplines, and she soon achieved this goal. It quickly became apparent that her performances blended dramatic expressiveness with the physical grace of dance. Knowing she possessed this talent, Lily prepared to participate in a festival. At this event, contestants had the opportunity to showcase their skills to the public and compete in various categories ranging from theater and dance to other artistic representations. Moreover, constructive feedback from qualified judges could help them improve their standards and also promote musical sponsorship within the community. Lily decided to perform a monologue from Macbeth, William Shakespeare's famous play, infusing it with her unique style. Instead of relying solely on dialogue and facial expression, she sought to convey the emotional journey of the main character through movement. The result was a harmonious combination that captivated the jury and earned her second place in the theatrical category. In the sporting arena, the talented young woman also earned amazing rewards, becoming the swimming champion in the under-17 category. As expected, Jamie and Peta were bursting with pride. For them, every achievement of their daughter was a cause for celebration. Like in 2018, when at just 16 years old, Lily passed her learner's driving test. Immediately, Peta and Jamie proudly shared the news on their social media. In 2020, during the high school graduation ceremony, Lily radiated light and happiness. Intelligent, beautiful, and possessing an independent spirit, the world opened up before her. By then, she had already decided to pursue a career in the sports world and enrolled at the University of Technology, Sydney, to study for a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In early 2021, with the start of classes, she took a part-time job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. From the beginning, the work experience turned out to be much more fascinating than the young woman had anticipated. With her vibrant personality, she managed to transform the classes into a unique, fun space, winning over her students' affection. Her age also played in her favor, making her closer to the group, and everyone felt as if they had known her forever. Part of Lily's charm as a teacher was taking the time for details. For example, she wrote cards for each student, focusing on their personalities, beauty, and individual talents. It was there that Lily met Paul, the coach and sports assistant at the school. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul was the only child of a couple with a privileged economic position. The family moved to Australia in 2015 when the father was transferred to Sydney for work reasons. Once there, Paul enrolled in St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team. Over time, after earning the respect and admiration of his peers, he was appointed captain. He also actively participated in the school community by being part of the leadership team, contributing to the planning and execution of various events. However, not all his peers had a good opinion of him. Some considered him quite arrogant, and they were bothered by the way he approached girls, as if all were willing to fall in love with him. As it later emerged in 2017, once Paul graduated from high school, the institution offered him the opportunity to become an assistant coach for the cricket and hockey teams. He accepted the offer, and at the beginning of 2018, fully took over the role. In his new role, he was attentive and enthusiastic about motivating the students. However, under circumstances that have not been clarified, Paul returned with his parents to the Netherlands. During that time, he enrolled in a master's program to complement his sports knowledge. At the end of it, he gladly accepted an invitation to rejoin the sports department at St. Andrew's School. At the start of 2020, returning to the Australian dream, Paul reconnected with a former school and hockey mate. The two young men decided to share expenses and moved into an apartment in Kensington, a suburb located in the eastern area. As part of his duties at St. Andrew, American Samoa, he was tasked with welcoming the sports teams of other coaches after their respective classes, which included being aware of their schedules. This responsibility facilitated his interaction with Lily. In addition to his primary job, Paul joined the field hockey team at the University of New South Wales and also taught at a second institution. Despite these activities, he was quite a solitary person. Then, on March 18, 2020, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Australian Prime Minister declared a health emergency and imposed a strict quarantine. The restrictions affected all sectors, leaving Paul not only without anything to do, but also isolated from all human contact. He spent a total of 18 months in solitude in a city that, although familiar, felt somewhat foreign to him. Like many people around the world, this isolation affected his way of relating to others to some extent. By mid-September 2021, as the restrictions were lifted and things began to return to normal, Paul resumed his activities. He rapidly became an essential part of the hockey team, to the point where his image was used in promoting the games. Amid this period of openness, he had already shown a particular interest in Lily, with intentions that clearly went beyond mere friendship. However, according to the students, she was not the only one to whom the young coach dedicated his charming efforts. In fact, some of his students viewed him as someone who inappropriately flirted with the school's teenage girls. However, these concerns were not widely known. In fact, many considered him an essential part of the team. His exceptional performance was crucial in leading them to the final of the Sydney Hockey League, even though they were defeated in that match on September 9, 2023. A few days later, Paul finally gathered the courage to ask Lily out, and she accepted happily, unaware of any rumors about him. Their first date turned out much better than either had imagined, leading them into a passionate and swift romance. However, the intensity of their feelings did not make them overlook the importance of discretion, especially considering their work environment. Thus, they opted to keep their relationship private. Initially, Lily kept her part of the agreement, but Paul, on the other hand, couldn't resist boasting to his students and began to hint that he was dating her. As expected, the rumor gradually spread throughout the educational center until in the first days of October 2023, Lily learned of his indiscretions and felt betrayed. For her, it was not a minor issue, as the way he bragged about their relationship left her exposed to criticism, leading to disappointment. The romance was just 5 weeks old, and if she couldn't trust him, she was determined to end it. She couldn't continue with someone like Paul. Despite his insistence and attempts at excuses and justifications, Lily made it clear there was nothing more to consider. It was definitively the end of any interaction between them. In a matter of hours, Paul's hurt from the breakup turned into anger, not at himself for breaking a promise, but at her for not forgiving him. Such anger led him to imagine various scenarios, all aimed at harming the young woman. He then decided to go to a hardware store and there chose what he considered the ideal weapon, a hammer. On October 25, 2023, Lily left her house and attended her university classes as usual. In the afternoon, she went to the school for another work day with her students. Meanwhile, Paul rented a silver car and arrived at the school in this vehicle. He didn't get out. He just stayed there, waiting patiently until the activities ended. Around 7 p.m., when the water polo students left, Paul finally made his way towards the institution's gym. In his hands, he carried the hammer. Once there, he saw Lily enter the bathroom and followed her. All his movements were recorded by the security cameras at the location. Inside the bathroom, with no witnesses, they argued. Everything happened very quickly, almost as swiftly as their brief love story had begun. Then, amidst the shouting, Paul managed to gain the upper hand and overpower Lily. The newly purchased tool was used to end her life. He then took the girl's backpack and cell phone, and about an hour later he left the bathroom. This sequence was captured again by the surveillance cameras. Afterward, he drove to the area known as the Gap, known for its cliffs. As he walked around for the third time, Paul was recorded by security cameras. Meanwhile, Peta and Jamie tried repeatedly to contact their daughter to no avail. Desperate, they decided to alert the police. The authorities immediately took notice of the situation and began searching for Lily. Around 10 at night, Paul sent a text message from the young woman's phone, asking Jamie to pick her up at the school without giving further explanations. An hour later, the 24-year-old perpetrator made an anonymous call to emergency services, reporting a body in the St. Andrew's School gym and stating that the case needed investigation. After hanging up, he disposed of the hammer and Lily's backpack in a garbage bin. He then abandoned the rented vehicle and walked to the edge of one of the cliffs, jumping and ending his own life. When the police arrived at the school, following the anonymous call just before midnight, the institution was in complete and utter silence, the opposite of its usual bustling energy. In the gym, as soon as the officers saw the silhouette on the floor, they realized their worst fears had come true. Lily's body lay lifeless. However, due to the severe injuries she suffered, investigators were initially unable to identify her. In the course of the investigation, the officers' first task was to seize the gym's security camera footage. Next, the team traced the anonymous call. It became quite clear that whoever had made it was likely to provide more information. Some reports state that the first thing they determined was that the number belonged to Paul, and they began to call him insistently. They didn't suspect him at the moment, but wanted him to share everything he knew. Unfortunately, the young man did not respond to the calls. Shortly after, the investigators were able to locate where the call had been made from. Thus, in the early hours of the morning on Thursday, October 26, 2023, the police arrived at the Gap area and cordoned off the surroundings. After patrolling and conducting thorough searches, they discovered the hammer, which was immediately considered the fatal weapon. Finally, the agents found Paul's belongings. Around 4 in the morning, the police officers requested the school authorities to suspend classes until the investigation was concluded. This measure was communicated to all parents and guardians through a text message mentioning a critical incident, naturally causing panic to set in every home in the community. 2 hours later, a second considerably more reassuring message arrived because by then, the school's management had decided to assure that no student was involved in the incident. However, after a sleepless night, Lily's parents received the devastating news of their daughter's cruel fate. Within minutes, the family's home was filled with neighbors and friends, all ready to offer as much support as possible in a situation no one could have ever imagined. Thanks to the gym's camera footage, the police identified Paul as the young man who had followed Lily. From there, authorities were able to outline the nature of the relationship between the main suspect and the victim, thus identifying a motive behind the crime. However, due to the lack of clues about his whereabouts, investigators began to consider the possibility that he might have taken his own life. Regardless, boats and even a helicopter were deployed along the coastline to find him. Through a statement, the police made the main suspect's name public, indicating that the nature of the injuries made it evident that Lily had been a victim of homicide. Although it was confirmed there were no previous domestic violence incidents between her and Paul. In the early hours of the next morning, Friday, October 27, 2023, a group of workers was preparing to start their day at a construction site near the top of one of the cliffs. However, they had to interrupt their work almost before it had begun when they were startled by the macabre sight of a body floating near the rocks. They immediately informed the police, who then established a new crime scene there and also organized a rescue team to recover the body. The unfavorable weather conditions made the already complicated operation even more difficult. Finally, by noon, the Marine unit achieved its goal with the assistance of a helicopter. The media was informed that the body was of an unidentified male victim, although officers had strong suspicions about his identity. Meanwhile, the remains were transported to the Forensic Medicine Service for a mandatory autopsy. The fingerprints collected were sent to the Embassy of the Netherlands for comparison with their records, leading to the identification of the man as Paul. That same afternoon, in their first public statement, Lily's family expressed the profound grief they were experiencing. Despite everything, they said they were overwhelmed with immense gratitude for the community's support. Concurrently, given that the police investigation was ongoing, they opted to refrain from further comments. The director of the school also shared warm words of thanks to everyone for the love and support provided during these difficult times. She mentioned that Lily had always displayed qualities that made her unforgettable. Beyond the pain of loss, it was hard to overlook the fact that the tragedy occurred in a space where minors should feel protected. Aware of this, the school sent a letter to parents assuring them that, in the words of the police, the crime was unforeseeable. In response to the events, access to the gym was restricted for students, while the library was transformed into a walk-in psychological counseling center for students needing specialist help to cope with the impact. Amid the case's impact, a renowned local media outlet contacted a criminal psychologist and expert in criminal cases for an interview to help the public understand the dimensions of the occurred events. When asked about his impression of the facts, he stated that the victim's actions were typical of men with fragile egos, incapable of accepting rejection. However, he viewed the young man's relationship not merely as one of anger or hurt, but as malicious. He highlighted that there was no spontaneity, but a clear intention to harm, something that, in his opinion, was evident from the cruelty with which Paul sent messages pretending to be Lily, asking to be picked up when the young woman was already deceased. Overall, for the expert, Paul's was a narcissistic profile with psychopathic tendencies. Paul's parents decided not to repatriate their son's remains to their home country. Instead, they opted to cremate him and scatter his ashes on a Sydney beach. Lily's funeral took place on November 17, 2023. The more than 500 attendees were asked to wear bright colors and bring flowers, as Lily would have liked. Perhaps the most emotional moment of the day was when Jamie spoke heartfelt words for his beloved daughter and to all those who had gathered in her name. Although it took Lily's grandmother some time to express her feelings, she eventually encapsulated her thoughts about her granddaughter magnificently. She said Lily's brief life was enough to make a difference in many lives. Jordan chased Zara for about half a mile with a shadow of persistence and evil. Zara, unaware of the danger, continued on her way without suspecting that evil was already approaching. Suddenly he appeared out of the darkness like a ghost, grabbed her by the neck with one hand and covered her mouth with the other so that the girl would not scream. He blocked her breathing and then dragged her into the thicket of the forest where darkness and inhumanity awaited the victim. There, a forgotten corner of the world, hell descended on Zara. He forcibly invaded her body, her soul, leaving only a scream of pain and horror that was lost in the darkness of the night. Despite her desperate attempts to resist, her cries remained unanswered in the ruthless void. This whole nightmare, this terrible aggression, lasted for 9 whole minutes, which seemed like an eternity for Zara, who felt fear and hopelessness. Then, as if nothing had happened, Jordan walked back to his house, leaving behind only traces of destruction and an absolute nightmare. But what if all this was just the beginning of an even more eerie and mysterious story? What if the hidden truth about what happened that terrible night turned out to be more confusing and dark than it seemed at first glance? Secrets hidden in the shadows of the past can destroy not only lives, but also destroy all that remains of hope and peace in this world. Only by digging deeper one can find the answers, but there are even more questions hiding behind them. In the winter of 1986, Zara Alina was born in the vast landscapes of Great Britain. She was the first of 5 children of a single mother, a young woman who mysteriously moved her life from the Pakistani slums to this corner of the UK back in 1968. Zara embodied the hopes and dreams of her parents, and her birth was an important event. She was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvin, and it brought her a special status in her community. From early childhood, Zara was surrounded by relatives who raised her to a pedestal, showering her with tenderness and care. She grew up surrounded by numerous generations, studying at a unique school of life where the rules were written in blood and betrayal. Despite their lack of finances, Zara's parents invested everything in their daughter's education, believing that she would be able to find everything she needed for a successful life. Their dreams were strong, their hopes were stronger, but in this world of dark streets and hidden ambitions, Zara's life was in danger, hanging over her like a dark cloud. From early childhood, the fire of passion and hunger for life burned in Zara's heart. She dived into the world of tap dancing, where every movement, like a note in a symphony of passion, gave birth to beauty and harmony. Swimming was another passion of her soul, allowing her to escape from the gray everyday life and feel the wave of freedom. She always dressed exquisitely, as if creating a work of art from herself, embodying her dreams in every outfit. But that was just the beginning. When she skated for the first time, she felt new breath of freedom in her soul. Skating became not just a hobby for her, but a way of breathing, a way of expressing the deepest essence of her soul. Among those who knew Zara, no one was surprised to hear that she dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Her heart was full of desire to protect and help others because she was that bright ray of hope in a world full of evil. Her friendly nature sparkled with joy, which was contagious, like a fire in the dark. Her gaze and sparkling eyes promised miracles, and her black curly hair seemed to have been created to tempt fate. Her image was full of charm, like a magic potion mixing passion, kindness, and courage in an extraordinary cocktail of attractiveness. Already in her teens, she had the opportunity to travel around England and visit museums and galleries. She showed big interest in art and culture. These trips became an indicator of how independent she was. Later, trips to the rest of Europe followed. This was a clear confirmation that she inherited the desire for adventure from her relatives. It seems she was following in the footsteps of her Aunt Farah, who, unlike the rest of the family, chose Portugal over the UK. It was fascinating for a young woman to see the work of her aunt, who worked as a psychotherapist in women's organizations. Zara visited her several times. After graduating from high school, her aspirations began to be realized when she got in the University of Westminster. Since then, she worked hard to achieve her goals while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Her tiny figure was full of a passionate soul and unstoppable energy. Her sense of justice and equality was not limited to the walls of the lecture hall. On the contrary, the generous and caring Zara supported refugees fleeing violence and sought to give a voice to those who had less power. She also participated in volunteer work in community canteens to help the homeless. In general, she had a special habit of noticing the needs of others and always including them in her schedule. Zara was an easygoing girl. Her Aunt Smira Naz lived nearby, and she often visited her several times a week. While preparing for the exams, she asked her aunt to help her to study, but they always ended up laughing. Zara left a trail of joy behind her everywhere she went, as those who knew her at that time claimed. In addition, she was hardworking, covered all her expenses, and helped her family. She worked at a local clothing store and knew everyone in the area, from teenagers to the elderly. She always greeted everyone with kindness and was willing to help if necessary. The young girl could talk for hours, but it did not affect her ability to listen carefully to others. Her generosity extended to all living creatures, and she especially loved cats. Sometimes she spent her own money to take stray cats to the vet, take care of them at home, or persuade neighbors to take them in. Her friend Sanji Naira described her as radiant and believed that her main gift was the ability to share optimism. When Sanji was in a bad mood, he turned to her for help. In Zara's life, there was a bright star whose name was engraved in the very depths of her heart, Carissa Peters. They were not just friends, but companions in the struggle for justice, for protection of women from violence and abuse. Their shared hobbies, especially in the field of women's rights, and it was the connecting thread that carried their friendship through difficulties and trials. Zara and Carissa were so close that they seemed to share the same soul. They easily entered each other's house as if they were their own shelters from the storms of the world, or talked on the phone almost every day, discussing the news, their thoughts and plans for the future. In 2002, after successfully passing the exams and completing her internship in law field, Zara had the opportunity to work in the Crown Prosecution Service. It was an important step and an integral part of her dream to become a full-fledged lawyer. To do this, she worked tirelessly, even when her studies were interrupted by worries about her mother and grandmother, as well as financial difficulties. This step was important not only for her, but also for Carissa, and for those who believed in her, who support her on this stormy journey to a bright future. On her first day at her new job, Zara couldn't help but be happy. She sent a smiley selfie to her friends and family, as if announcing to the whole world her new era of life. It wasn't just a new job. It was the last piece in the mosaic of her dreams. She had been coming to this for so long that she could hardly believe in her own happiness. Working as an administrator might seem a secondary post, but for Zara, it was a giant step towards her goal. At the age of 35, she realized that a new stage in her life was beginning, and this made her heart beat with extraordinary force. It wasn't just a working day. It was the beginning of a new era, an era when she felt fulfilled and happy. The new job strengthened her confidence in the fact that it was time to create her own family. She dreamed of her children, how they would be happy and protected, how they would live in a world filled with love and harmony. At that moment, Zara realized that every new day was a step towards her happiness, a step towards her dream of having her own family. With such an active life between work, volunteering, friends, and the attentive care of her mother and grandmother, with whom she lived in a separate room when necessary, Zara loved to walk. She liked to move freely. She didn't bother with small things. She could easily put a pair of shoes in her bag to change them for sneakers when needed. Zara believed that a woman should be able to move freely without any obstacles, and even more so that no one should have deprived them of this right. But near her house, there was a man whose existence completely took away this woman's right. His name was Jordan McSweeney. He was a few years younger than Zara, and it was unknown where he was from. One Saturday evening, when the sun had already set below the horizon, Zara was going to meet a friend. Even though she was not in the mood, she decided not to cancel the meeting. Zara's word was as strong as steel, and she always stuck to her promises, not allowing her mood to dictate her actions. Her devotion was as steady as a rock, and she was ready to walk through thick and thin for the sake of her friends. Before leaving, Zara picked up the phone to talk to Aunt Farah, but this time, there was a certain anxiety in her voice that did not go unnoticed. Her aunt asked her to be careful, and Zara realized that even if she wasn't going to go far from home, the world around her seemed strange and unpredictable that evening. But she stubbornly told herself that she knew every dark corner of the city, and her name was known to everyone who had ever looked at her. But something about this evening made her heart beat faster, and Zara decided to be more careful. At the appointed time, she met her friend at a local bar called the Ilford Big Spoon, located on the West End of London. Ilford is a lively and diverse London area, an ideal place for dinner and gatherings, so the girls visited this place that Saturday evening. Then they went to another bar, and there Zara drank a couple glasses of water. At the same time, Jordan was having one drink after another at another nearby nightclub. An idea was forming in his mind, and he refused to resist it. He intended to find a woman to attack that evening. Surveillance cameras recorded how Jordan met women at the entrance to the club, hugged them without their consent, and tried to kiss them. He was particularly persistent with one of the employees, despite her obvious reluctance. He was kicked out of the club a little after 23 o'clock, and his inappropriate behavior remained recorded on cameras. When he came out, his actions were recorded by cameras as he walked along Romford Street towards the park. Seeing the woman walking, Jordan followed her and approached her closely, although she tried to avoid him by entering the store. He was waiting for her outside. When the woman cautiously left, Jordan followed her again. Then he walked down the other side of the street, leaving her in sight. However, when the woman entered her house, Jordan had no choice but to continue on his way. According to the surveillance camera's data, at about 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed a woman approaching him. Suddenly, he quickened his pace, approaching her. But on the video, you can see that two passing witnesses noticed Jordan's strange actions. Despite the man's suspicious behavior, the woman returned home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and annoyed. He returned to Cranbrook Street without success. At this time, Zara and her friend deciding to return home left the bar when it was 2 a.m. A friend took a taxi, preferring convenience, while Zara, given the short distance and good weather, decided to walk. They parted, and Zara headed down the residential street of Cranbrook, which is a 10-minute walk from her house. That's when Jordan noticed her. According to the chief inspector, Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention. He was going to attack a woman that night regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy even in the early morning hours. There was a constant flow of traffic. At the age of 13, Jordan had already been sentenced in Kent Juvenile Court for various offenses committed between 2006 and 2009. In August 2010, when he was 17 years old, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, leaving her with a swollen eye, and he was given a 4-month detention and correction period. 11 years later, he attacked another woman, and he was again banned from approaching a woman, this time for 3 years. During this time, he had no right to contact her directly or indirectly. By 2010, Jordan had 28 convictions for 69 crimes, including theft, assaults on police and the public, criminal cases, theft of motor vehicles, traffic violations, committing crimes with bail, and shoplifting. On his page on a well-known social network, he bragged about having a huge collection of weapons, and in general extolled a criminal lifestyle to the sky, posting different photos and quotes. He also posted fake pictures saying that the FBI was looking for him. On June 17, 2022, he was released on parole after being sentenced to prison for criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and illegal carrying of a bladed weapon. One of the conditions was meetings with a parole officer. Jordan settled into a van on St. Valentine Street in a 130 acres park in the south of Gun Hill, the largest green space in London's Red Bridge district. He again violated all agreements and, true to his criminal background, missed not one, but 2 meetings with a parole officer. As a result, the authorities refused to give him the advantage. The parole service began the procedure for returning him to prison on June 22, 2022. But they did not immediately inform the police, but only 2 days later. Early on Saturday morning, June 25th, police visited Jordan's mother's house to arrest him and found an unpleasant surprise. He was not there. Around 2:30 a.m. on June 26, 2022, the streets of Ilford witnessed a terrible crime. Zara was found on the sidewalk with signs of abuse on her body. Her belongings were scattered, as if the mess in her life was embodied in the streets. Her body was bruised, her clothes were torn, and her eyes showed struggle for survival. A woman passing by immediately realized that the situation was extremely serious. Without hesitation, she began to give Zara a closed chest massage and do CPR, trying to give her the last hope of survival. But the injuries inflicted on her body turned out to be too serious. Even with all the help of passers-by and emergency medical help, it was too late. Zara fought for her life, but the severe wounds and brutality of the crime were too strong. At 9:58 a.m. on Sunday, she passed away, leaving only the painful traces of a struggle behind. At that time, at about 11 a.m. in the park, Jordan, recorded by security cameras, was getting rid of evidence, throwing out his clothes. With his indifferent and cold-blooded demeanor, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. The police responded quickly and knocked on Zara's grandmother's door, asking her to identify her granddaughter from the bar's video footage. When she confirmed that it was her, the police finally explained to her what had happened. Zara's uncle, Kazim Alina, called the rest of the family, including Aunt Farah, to tell them what had happened. In Portugal, her aunt, crying, remembered the call on Saturday night. After she broke the news to her children, Farah immediately flew to London. The family was in shock, trembling with horror. It was difficult for all of them to eat, sleep, or talk. Although they hardly dared to mention Zara's death, they also could not think of anything else. Meanwhile, detectives immediately began investigating the area where Zara was found. One of the first steps was to collect video footage from surveillance cameras to track the attacker's movements. This, along with the bloody fingerprints left near the scene, allowed them to identify Jordan. They then tracked his location using a video surveillance system. After receiving images of the main suspect, Inspector Dave sent an officer to Gun Hill to check if anyone else recognized Jordan. The operation was successful, and almost immediately they found Jordan sleeping in his van. The authorities immediately arrested him. Confused and stunned, Jordan had no resistance during the arrest. Clothes and shoes stained with blood were found in his trailer, which Jordan was trying to get rid of. Despite many hours of interrogation, Jordan remained silent, refusing to reveal his name or give details of his life. At the same time, new video footage continued to appear, allowing police to reconstruct the chronology of events. The crime led parole officer Justin Russell to highlight a number of errors in the treatment of Jordan. It was noted that Jordan had been a criminal since the age of 16, both in and out of prison, which made him a high-risk criminal. He had been a high-risk criminal since the age of 16, but it turned out that he had not been treated appropriately. They should have taken more urgent measures to return him to prison after he missed scheduled supervision appointments upon release from detention. They didn't do it. On Wednesday, June 29th, through a press release read by the police, Zara's family expressed how shocking the last few days have been. Logically, for them, it was an irreparable loss. Nevertheless, they stressed that the warmth and kindness shown by people were valuable to them and served as evidence of the strength of their beloved Zara's spirit. The family had a lot to do, and they needed to find strength. Aunt Farah communicated with the media and met with the police. Despite the shock and grief, her family, especially her aunt, taking into account her own experience in this field, knew that it was necessary to control the situation and protect Zara from accusations from certain media. On July 1st, 2022, a preliminary hearing was held in the Jordan case. And on September 30th of the same year, a date was set for a hearing to prepare testimony in the trial. However, on the day of the scheduled trial, Jordan did not show up due to a positive test for COVID-19, and the hearing had to be postponed. On Saturday, July 2nd, a memorial service was held in memory of Zara, organized by her family, which took place on the way to her home, symbolizing the last journey that never ended. At this service, many of those present were dressed in white, symbolizing a silent walk. The event was attended by a coalition of more than 120 organizations specializing in supporting women, expressing solidarity in the fight against violence. It was one of the many groups that worked with Zara Alina's family. As they stated in the media, they demanded justice and taking responsibility. Additionally, they asked to focus on what they considered a priority and key issue: to resist violence from men, and to stop the acts of violators. At a preliminary hearing before the investigation at the East London court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persett said she believes there is reason that local police officers could and should have taken more action to find Jordan before his attack on Zara. Consequently, she expressed the opinion that jury should resolve this issue. In addition, this investigation should have included the actions of the staff of corrections facilities for probationers. According to Nadia, this process was supposed to last a month. On November 16, 2022, Jordan also did not appear at the hearing despite being told that this was mandatory. Thus, the meeting was organized via video call. This time, he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow then described him as extremely unfit candidate for bail. This opinion was also supported by Judge Chima Grove. As for the verdict, the judge postponed it until December 14th of the same year. Approaching this date, Jordan again refused to appear in court. But even this did not prevent Jordan from being sentenced to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 33 years in prison for the murder of Zara Alina. The accused and his representatives filed an appeal, and the sentence was reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge stated that the fact that Zara was unconscious, did not feel anything, and did not suffer reduced his sentence. Just 4 months later, it became known that Jordan had an intimate relationship with a woman who worked at the Belmar Correctional Service in South London, but was not a direct employee of the prison services. The Metropolitan Police later announced that a 32-year-old woman whose identity was not disclosed had been arrested, and was under investigation on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. As for Zara Alina's family, everyone remembers Zara with love and pride. They still miss her. For her part, Aunt Farah continues to speak out against violence against women and girls. In March 2023, She joined a march organized by various groups seeking to draw attention to the issue and raise awareness. The protesters marched through the commercial district of West London to Trafalgar Square. Among various slogans, they stated that the lack of action against male violence is equal to abuse by the state. The tragic loss of Zara Alina has only added dark shades to this bloody picture of violence that consumes the hearts and minds of those who seek to change the world. Vilma Gabriela Nino de Guzman de la Rosa was born in Peru in the late 1940s. She married José Tejada Ramirez, a man 21 years her senior. José had an older son from his first marriage. After they started living, he increasingly started distancing from his previous family, including his son. Vilma had a strong and reserved character. In contrast, she was a woman who reserved all her tenderness and dedication for the plants in her garden. Caring for them meticulously, talking to them, and observing them daily was an activity that offered her unparalleled peace. When she finally felt the call of motherhood, it was not easy for her to fulfill her dream. José was over 70 years old while she had already passed her most fertile age. However, she was not one to give up easily. Thus, the couple decided to undergo fertility treatment. Finally, after a long struggle at 49, Vilma received what she considered the best news of her life. She was pregnant. Later, when the couple learned they were expecting a girl, José felt tremendous joy. It seemed like a miracle, one he could never have imagined at his age. For her part, Vilma promised to be the best mother possible for the child. The little girl came into the world at the start of the new millennium, and they named her Stephanie. Healthy, rosy-cheeked, and cheerful as the girl grew, she confirmed to her parents that the decision to have her had been the best. With her smile and vivacity, awakened in both a new energy and tenderness they had not known before. Over time, the girl proved to be very coquettish, feminine, and a fashion lover. Although the exact date is unknown, José suffered a stroke. While he survived, the aftermath was significant, as José was left disabled and was later diagnosed with senile dementia. Meanwhile, Vilma had to face raising her daughter alone. Her ambition was for Stephanie to become a righteous woman and, hopefully, a future doctor in medicine. However, as often happens, Stephanie's entry into puberty brought changes in her behavior. It was 2012, and suddenly the once sweet and warm girl began showing signs of rebellion. As expected, this transformation also disrupted the mother-daughter relationship. Suddenly, that residence became the scene of constant confrontations that grew more frequent over time. Most of these fights occurred when Vilma forbade her daughter from going out with friends. For Stephanie, being locked up at home was tormenting, even perceiving it as a prison. In April of that same year, the young girl took an interest in another student from her high school named Fernando. He was a fairly calm boy with many friends and no history of violence or rebellious behavior. When they met, it was love at first sight for him. Stephanie was not only a beautiful girl, but also confident and decisive. Thus, they quickly became a couple. At 15, Fernando felt on top of the world, capable of anything. But sometime later, everything changed. By the end of 2012, the relationship between the teenagers was tumultuous, as evidenced by a letter that Stephanie wrote to him. In her own handwriting, the young girl boasted of knowing her own charms perfectly, making it clear that if he didn't measure up, she could easily replace him with another boy. Although Vilma learned of her daughter's relationship, she initially tried not to interfere. After all, she believed it was likely just a fleeting, insignificant romance typical of Stephanie's age. But months passed with no sign of the affair ending. Meanwhile, Stephanie took control of the relationship, knowing how to dominate Fernando. She liked to give orders and, of course, to be obeyed. When this did not happen, she punished him, scratching him, justifying it by saying he well deserved it. Far from leaving her or at least reacting, Fernando endured the situation, hopelessly in love, to the point of even setting aside his preferences, dignity, or social life. Because by then, the relationship also distanced him from his friends. Judging by some leaked text messages, the young man felt lost and, in essence, suffered greatly after each fight with his girlfriend. An example of this is an audio message Fernando sent to Stephanie at 2 a.m. on January 6, 2013. Besides showing how insecure he was regarding her feelings, Fernando said some quite worrying things, talking about ending someone's life and seeking his girlfriend's support for these ideas. Although it was not clear to whom Fernando was referring, it was true that around that time Stephanie had started flirting with other young men. And of course, in the school environment, the news quickly spread. Upon hearing the rumors, Vilma opposed the relationship between her daughter and Fernando. This became the cause of countless fights. Refusing to obey her mother, Stephanie continued to see Fernando in secret. On Saturday, January 11, 2014, just before noon, the girl snuck her boyfriend into her house. They then went up to the second floor to her room, where they locked themselves in to watch TV and later had an intimate encounter. When Fernando's father noticed his son's absence, suspecting he had returned to Stephanie, he began calling him on the phone. Distracted or perhaps anticipating his father's reproaches, Fernando did not answer. However, his father was not willing to give up, so he went to Stephanie's house to look for him. Once there, the man's shouts made Vilma come out of her room on the first floor. Although she ignored him and did not open the door, she immediately understood what was happening. Filled with anger, Vilma went upstairs and, without a word, broke into the room where her teenage daughter was with her boyfriend. It was at that moment that a fight broke out between the three, but it was an unequal struggle as Fernando soon managed to immobilize the woman. At that moment, Stephanie delivered a strong blow to her mother's head. The force was such that Vilma fell to the floor, dying. Immediately after, the teenager placed the body under her bed. Then Fernando and she went to the bathroom to clean themselves. At 90 years old and with senile dementia, Jose heard nothing and was unaware of anything. After that, Fernando went home. Later that same day, Stephanie kept in touch with dozens of people through her social media accounts. She confessed she felt that her heart was at peace and that her problems had finally ended, expressing the pleasurable feelings she was experiencing without specifying the reason. From that moment, Stephanie moved into her mother's room, which was about 10 meters away from hers. Additionally, she took the savings Vilma had, just over $10,000, and went on a shopping spree, spending as she pleased. 48 hours later, she posted a photo taken with her cell phone camera, in which she appeared wearing short floral pants and a pink blouse, holding a small puppy she had just bought in her right hand. She also paid for a change of style. As days passed, the teenager remained calm, even with her mother's decomposing body in the house. She continued to party with friends on several occasions. Jose, due to his health condition and advanced age, did not receive the care he needed from his daughter. When the smell from the second floor became unbearable, she and Fernando sprayed the room with various cleaning products and insecticides. They also partially covered the stained wall with black paint. Meanwhile, despite not being particularly friendly with them, the neighbors noticed that Vilma had not been seen watering the plants in her garden for a while. On January 16th, Stephanie called Fernando to tell him that 3 people were going to help her take out her mother's remains. According to his later testimony, Fernando suddenly felt a great repulsion towards his girlfriend, almost as if for the first time he fully understood what kind of person she was. He then decided to end their relationship. Although he no longer communicated with her or saw her, Stephanie tried to contact him in any way possible. Realizing that her text messages and calls were not being answered, the minor spoke with Marco, a cousin of Fernando's, and through him, she sent messages via one of her social media accounts. There, with encrypted messages, she asked him not to do anything foolish and not to say anything about what had happened. By that time, Vilma's loved ones had tried to contact her without success. Every time they asked Stephanie, she gave some excuse. After some time, they stopped believing her explanations and began to suspect that something had happened to her. In early March 2014, Vilma's relatives reported her strange disappearance to the authorities. Consequently, on the night of Sunday, March 9th of that year, the police arrived at the house with them. When they did not receive a satisfactory response from Stephanie about her mother's prolonged absence, the officers broke into the property with the family's authorization. Once inside, they found Stephanie nervously giving them the runaround in an attempt to hinder the authorities' progress. But the young woman's efforts were in vain, as the strong smell and the flies buzzing all over the place only heightened the police's worst fears. Upon turning the key to the room, the macabre scene was revealed in a matter of seconds. For 57 days, Vilma's body had been there, in the room of the daughter. Forensic experts at the scene found a knife, which was taken for analysis to determine if it had been used to kill Vilma. The authorities immediately considered Stephanie the main suspect in the crime. However, in her version of events, she tried to absolve herself of any responsibility and accused Fernando. Within minutes, reporters swarmed the surroundings of the house. The head of the Criminal Investigation Division informed the press of what was known so far based on the minor statements. Thus, both the motive and the cause of Vilma's death were still under investigation. The 65-year-old woman's body was transferred for forensic examinations. Meanwhile, news cameras managed to enter the house and obtained images of the teenager's room. There, marks on the floor were still visible, despite the presence of several bottles of different elements, presumably used to erase them. It wasn't until the following day, Monday, March 10, 2014, that the police formalized the request to initiate a process for violation of criminal law for the crimes committed by the 14-year-old minor. Consequently, Stephanie was forced to remain in a juvenile center for the duration of the process. In the early hours of Tuesday, amidst the tumult of reporters and neighbors, agents transferred Stephanie as some of those present shouted accusations at her. Due to her status as a minor, she wore her face semi-hidden with a cap. Nevertheless, she took advantage of the cameras and microphones to defend herself. During the police interrogation, Stephanie added more details to her version of events. This time, she said that her mother became enraged upon discovering her with her boyfriend and then hit her with an iron bar. At that moment, Fernando came to her defense and attacked Vilma, injuring her in the left eye. They struggled and then he pulled out a knife. She took the blade from him and tried to attack him, but he crawled away and with another blunt object hit Vilma 3 more times in the head. The story continued with Stephanie going to the bathroom to clean the wound her own mother had inflicted on her. By that time, Vilma was already showing no signs of life, and Fernando also approached the sink to wash off the traces of the crime they had just committed. In conclusion, Stephanie only admitted to hiding the body. A few hours later, after being summoned by the authorities, Fernando appeared at the police station to give his testimony. He arrived accompanied by his father and his lawyer. The detectives heard from the young man that all responsibility for the crime lay exclusively with Stephanie. Furthermore, Fernando claimed that the girl was tired of the constant physical abuse she suffered at the hands of her mother. The boy recounted that the teenager used the same bar with which her mom had hit her several times. However, Fernando's version did not convince the police either, as he made serious contradictions during the interrogation. Consequently, the police decided that the young man should be held as the suspected co-author and accomplice of the homicide. It was up to the prosecution to decide whether to charge him. On the afternoon of March 12th, 60 days after the crime, Vilma's body was removed from the morgue and was taken directly to the cemetery where she was buried in the presence of family and friends. One of the victim's nieces called for the maximum penalty for the 2 minors involved, adding that for teenagers, it seemed all too easy to kill without facing responsibilities. She also mentioned that Stephanie was very much loved by her mother and denied there was a bad relationship between them. Meanwhile, the prosecution's decision led to Fernando's arrest. The teenager was placed in a juvenile center. Experts concluded that he was a young man with a tendency towards introversion, easily influenced by a figure that generated emotional attachment. They also indicated that Fernando submitted to his partner's wishes, allowing himself to be manipulated to satisfy her desires, showing himself submissive and compliant out of fear of emotional abandonment. Regarding Stephanie, forensic psychologists saw that the young woman had psychopathological traits in her personality. Amidst the twists and turns of the case, a television report revealed that Stephanie had been influenced by another girl who was in prison for killing her mother after a heated argument on March 5, 2005. It was also stated that Stephanie stored poems of her on a tablet or personal computer. At the end of March that same year, Stephanie insisted on her innocence through a letter. There, she explained that when she misbehaved and did not obey her mother, she was hit with a towel or a notebook, but not with an iron bar. An unexpected twist was her portrayal of Fernando, whom she accused of mistreatment and threats, even against his father. The reason was simple. He was obsessed with her and aimed to socially isolate her. Lastly, she assured that she loved and respected her mother and was overwhelmed with sadness from missing her father so much. In this story, Jose too was a victim of circumstances, even though he was unaware of what was happening around him. The elderly man was left at the mercy of Vilma's family when the firstborn finally learned of the crime and traveled from Brazil. He found that Vilma's family refused to let him see his own father. After turning to the authorities, Jose's son was finally able to rescue him. He found his father in a state of neglect and uncleanliness, and they were unable to find his documents anywhere in the house. Consequently, his lawyer reiterated his request for the relevant agency to expedite the delivery of this documentation. Without it, neither Jose nor his son could claim his pension. The entire country remained attentive to any new detail, even those concerning the daily life of the main suspect. Once transferred to a new center, Stephanie made headlines again when it was revealed that she shared a third-year classroom with another minor accused of a similar crime, Rosalinda. Her case was also highly publicized in Peru. The young girl, who had suffered excessive abuse at the hands of her mother, retaliated against her and took her life. The director of the juvenile center told a Peruvian TV program that the two girls had no problems adapting to the group and also showed acceptable performance. According to her, as part of her job, it was not her place to judge them. Instead, it was necessary to do everything possible as a system to reintegrate them into society. The young women could be confined there until they turned 20. As Peruvian law only imposes a maximum of 6 years of readaptation in juvenile centers for crimes committed by minors. For adults, the country's legislation imposes up to 35 years of effective imprisonment for those responsible for these crimes. On the night of Thursday, April 10, 2014, the crime reconstruction took place. During this, the young woman smiled, made victory gestures, and showed no remorse. Fernando also participated, unlike Stephanie, chose not to speak to the press and preferred to hide his face, wearing a bulletproof vest at all times. Both arrived from their respective juvenile centers and had no contact with each other during the procedure. However, coldly and without showing regret, they attacked and accused each other. Upon leaving the scene, Stephanie began to play with her hair as the cameras from photographers and television stations focused on her. Meanwhile, Fernando's defense argued that the accusation against their client was full of contradictions. The psychological assessment of the crime scene conducted by experts found evidence of cruelty, planning, and simulation of the events, including the use of air fresheners and wall paint to hide blood traces. Days later, Jose visited his daughter for the first time. Still coming to terms with the events and remembering little, he hoped Stephanie would tell him everything. After leaving, following a 2-hour visit, he mentioned that his daughter blamed her former boyfriend for the crime, insisting to him that she was incapable of such evil. Jose carried with him a gift from his daughter, a pink heart saying she loved him. In the second half of April 2014, Stephanie's situation worsened when investigations into her cell phone uncovered threatening messages she had sent Fernando. These texts were retrieved by the young man's family for use in court, aiming to prove that Stephanie had planned the crime. By the end of July 2014, the prosecution formally charged Stephanie as the perpetrator of her mother's murder, with Fernando deemed an accomplice to the crime. In both cases, the public ministry requested 6 years of detention in a juvenile center and a compensation payment of $1,300. The prosecution's conclusions were based on the autopsy report, psychological assessments, and the crime scene's psychological appraisal. Exclusive footage of Fernando in court was captured by a television camera. Walter, Fernando's father, was outraged by the verdict, insisting that there was no evidence incriminating his son. He believed that the inability to absolve Stephanie led to Fernando being charged as an accomplice. Contrary to the father's hopes, in October 2014, Fernando was sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison, while Stephanie received a 6-year sentence. After serving their sentences, Stephanie and Fernando were released with no further updates on their lives made public. Yet in Peru, the memory of this shocking story lingers, a story of a daughter whose miraculous birth filled her parents with joy, only to later become a figure far from the angel they had dreamt of spending their final years with. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.